Just to
Uh,
begin, was there a lot of music in your house as a young lad growing up?
there was kind of guitar leaning in the corner, which my dad thumped away on every now and then, I remember, as I tried to go to sleep, which was really nice. He'd play Lou Reed songs and stuff. But the main music that was in my house was the record collection. So that was a big, what I thought was huge. It seemed like an endless library to me of a lot of early electric blues, the sort of the Chess Records era, Howling Wolf, Sonny Boy Williamson, and down and out blues. A lot of these kind of albums, and then there was a pretty strong. He was kind of into the whole R&B thing, so there's a lot of Yardbirds and them, and early Bowie and Beatles and Stones and Pretty Things and all this kind of era, which he loved as well. And he often took me to see concerts too. So he took me to see the Rolling Stones when I was about 2 months old, I think, and then took me to see Lou Reed when I was about 4. And he'd take me to classical concerts too. I think he saw that this was a world I was really half in somehow, I kind of was living in that world, musical world. And so he, I guess, tried to remove any obstacles in the way of that.
So when you started developing your own tastes in music, could you look back and see a uniform quality amongst the artists that were really standing out to you?
I think what I liked was extreme stuff. So I kind of went through lots of phases of really. I liked, when I was quite young, I liked this sort of real poppy wave of new romantic stuff coming over from England. Nick Kershaw and Duran and all this kind of stuff. It's really held some power over me for a while, and then I moved into quite a bit heavier music and started to enjoy Metallica, and then moved into this sort of death metal phase before I don't know how you say it, came to my senses maybe, or suddenly realised it was kind of hard to take it seriously after a while. So I then started to get into probably alternative independent music with Human Music compilation coming out of the States, where I heard bands like G.G. Allen and some of the more experimental side of what Sonic Youth are doing. And there was a whole movement in New Zealand at this time that seemed to be just a burgeoning scene of flying nun bands, Delta Space, Headless Chickens, all this sort of Straight Jacket Fits. These are the bands that really stood out to me, and then a logical extension of that somehow, I don't know how I made the connection, but in my mind seemed to be what the Birthday Party were doing, and that somehow, seemed to all join up in my head as, I think I had Tom Waits around that time too, or maybe earlier, so it all seemed to be this kind of a different approach to music that had a much more theatrical element, maybe you could put it, or it also seemed to have the idea of ghosts in it, and a way that you could channel musical eras or musical thoughts or spirits into what you were doing as well, which is something I've always been really interested in. And the more I work with music, the more I kind of see it like that you just open up and see what comes through you, and hopefully it's something you like. And if not, then it's another question. But it seems to me like the ultimate in creativity is not that you are generating this stuff, it's just that you are getting out of the way of it. You are opening the window and letting it pour through.
Yeah. Talking about your early songwriting efforts, was there a light bulb moment when you discovered you had the ability to write, and how did you go about developing that craft?
I think I worked a lot as a side, more accompaniment musician, or definitely, I had a weird experience when I was young where I was meant to be a singer in a band, and I went to do the first gig, and I got really nervous, and I drank a bottle of vodka and smoked all this marijuana, and then I just couldn't do it. So I ended up going and hiding under someone's bed for some hours because it just was this sort of hallucination. The thing that was happening to me was just too much, and I had to kind of get away from everybody. So I was just too wasted. So I had to get away and hide, and then I think that made me really nervous about going anywhere near it for a while. So it was quite late. I think I was about 26 when I actually started singing, and I'd been living in Melbourne for years, working as a drummer with Stu Thomas and the Brass Bed. Played in a band called Doghouse with him and Nick Needles, a guy called Mark Damasio. And we were always sort of trying to find different ways to do things. It started off as a really Tom Waits influenced band, but it ended up turning more Stonesy and more kind of definitely getting into this sort of rock side, which had some great results. And then I played a bit of bass with Stu for a while, and then I moved back to New Zealand, and I realised, shit, there's no band. You're going to have to do all those things yourself now. So I think that's when I really started singing, and I started learning a whole lot of Hank Williams songs because they seem easy to learn and easy to remember because they're so linear. You know, there's a story to them, and you tell the story, and it's kind of the song. And I definitely remember thinking he seemed like, to be able to do what he did in the amount of time he did, he opened a window and he was like a conduit for this spirit that he could pour into this really simple format. Somehow he just could do that, you know. So I think that's the first time I thought about songwriting as that kind of in that way. And I remember sitting down and just thinking, you can sit around and you can wait for ideas. But I remember sitting at this table just saying, you're just going to write songs, and just sitting there for some hours, pushing ideas around and not even having a guitar, but just writing chords on the page and knowing how, you know, being able to hear in my head how it would all go. And that was, I think, the moment when I realized, it's a craft. It's something you can do. You don't have to sit around. I remember hearing a Nick Cave interview where he was talking about that too. He was talking about people thinking you have to sit there and wait for the song to fall out of the sky, or you can just sit down and start, you know. I think the creative space you get into is something you can wait to come to you, but you can also take steps towards it. And if you do sit down and write, maybe the first couple of things you start pushing around won't be so enveloping or exciting or feel like divine inspiration, but as you push those ideas around, you start getting into that space, and then that's that classic thing. That's just time. You just have to put in time.
Yeah.
And you're going to get results for sure.
Now, you also based yourself in Switzerland for a while. Is that right?
Yeah, I lived there from sort of roughly 1990 to about 97, 98.
How do you look back on that time now?
Sorry, 2000 to 2008. I look at it as I guess it was for me a time where I saw, like, living in Melbourne. I lived in Melbourne for about 7 or 8 years, and music was something that was fun and you could do, and you could be in 20 bands and you could do all this stuff. And when I was in New Zealand, it was the same. It was, you can play gigs every now and then and jam around for people. And then when I went to Switzerland, I realised, you can make a living as an artist. You can tour. There's enough territory and a big enough market that you can tour pretty constantly. You can do work as a theatre musician. You can work with a label. All this stuff suddenly seemed to become much more possible than it ever had felt like it was in New Zealand or Australia. So I kind of I realised you could do that, and then I realised, that's the life I want. So I moved out of the place I was living, got rid of pretty much everything I owned and just started touring non-stop. So I did about 6 or 7 years of that. And if I had downtime between tours, I would see if anybody needed some house sitting done or would stay with friends. It just felt like a real itinerant kind of time. And a lot of that was with a band called the Dead Brothers, and that kind of felt to me like my tertiary education in the career I was going to pursue. I think I spent about 3 years with them, recorded a couple of albums, did a whole lot of touring around Europe, went to Russia, went to South America to play, just really started to get a bit more used to life as what it means to be a musician, what you need to do. That led me forward into how I live today, which is not so itinerant. I live in a little house in New Zealand, but I definitely moved into living as a musician from music.
Yeah. And outside of music, you've also had involvement in theatre and visual arts. How important has it been for you to have those multiple creative outlets? And do they all help each other in various ways?
Yeah, I think they do. I always thought they're important to. It's important to think about what you want to do, what you want people to see when you're on stage. You know, how you present yourself, or do you? I notice as well with video. I do a lot of work with video, and I think it's important. And the posters you put up, the album artwork, all that stuff's really giving people a feeling for the flavour you want, and the kind of like a flag or a signal of how you see what you do, giving people, more of a clue maybe than a three-word gothic alt Americana, whatever. Something that people think is really important to try and pigeonhole the bands they might be interested in. Go and check out the artwork they do, and it might help you just as much,
Mm.
So I think visual is really important for music. And then, they're funny because they are similar and they do feed each other, but at the same time they're very, very different. I think if you're thinking visually, you really have to wrestle your head into a different space than if you're thinking musically.
Yeah. Has your theatre experience influenced the way you present to an audience in a gig situation?
Yeah, I always thought this is really it's kind of like I look at it, because I did a lot of work in kitchens, and I always think there's this real misunderstanding between front of house and kitchen. The people in the kitchen, in my experience, always used to get annoyed with the waiters because they thought they always were wanting something to eat, or they were always kind of being a pain in the ass. And the people in the front of house always thought the guys in the kitchen were crazy because they were grumpy, and they would get shitty if they had to do something again for a customer, or if a customer had a special wish. And I mean, it's a pretty naive way to look at it, but it seems like that happens a lot in restaurants, and in a way it shouldn't, because you're both working ultimately together for the customers. But so I always saw this thing with actors and musicians that had a similar flavour. I remember working in the theatre and seeing an actor come to a music rehearsal, and they just said, "Man, what's happened? There's something wrong." And they were like, "What? What are you talking about?" "No, that's just how it is that's how a music rehearsal is. Everyone's kind of grumpy and surly, and and I think with theatre, because you put yourself out so much, you really need a creative, positive environment to work in. Otherwise, it's quite exposing, and you can be quite fragile if you're really trying stuff out. So they work much more positively with each other, and they use positive motivation. And I think musicians are a bit more tricky than that, and more taciturn. They're not so. They don't go out of their way to make you feel good, in my experience. But I always thought they could learn a lot from each other. Like, you see some musicians on stage and you can't believe how they don't give anything to the audience. And then you see an actor and you can't believe what they can bring across with a simple gesture of the hand or a turn of the head or something.
Yeah.
And you can really see that could be something that a lot of musicians could benefit so much from, would be to work with actors a little bit and start to build a bit more of that into their show, maybe. Just the idea of how to connect to people, not just through the music.
Yeah. You seem to be someone who thrives on the collaborative process, working with others. Is that your preferred way of working?
Not really. I do enjoy it. Sometimes I hate it, though, because I would rather just be ticking away on something by myself. I heard a saying the other day, which was really interesting. It said, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. And if you want to go a long way, take a group of people.
I like that.
And I thought that's really interesting in terms of collaborative process. I think that's really true, because by yourself you can cover a lot more ground and just go for it.
Yeah.
But then I've had experiences that were the absolute opposite, where I was working with somebody else, and just two brains working on one song at the same time. Decision making so much faster, ideas come so much quicker. You've got someone to feed off. You've got someone to bounce ideas off. You've got someone who inspires your thinking as well. So it can be, with the right person, it can be a flammable situation in a way. It just takes off. I think I like both. I think it comes down to that same idea, but what I said before, of the creative spirit, if you like. And when there's two of you, you kind of both can channel that.
Someone you have worked extensively with is Marlon Williams. Tell us about working with him and what it is about Marlon that makes a good collaborator for you.
I think when I first started to work with Marlon, we were booked to play the same gig together, not together, separately, by a friend of ours who, Adam McGrath, does these regular gigs, and he said, do you want to go and do this Wednesday night for me? I won't be there. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I turned up, and there's this young guy walking across the car park with his guitar. And I was looking at him like, oh, okay. And it was Marlon. So we sat down and figured we knew heaps of the same songs, so we just thought we'd do the show together, which was great. And we didn't really even need to rehearse. We just played the show. And the thing I noticed about working with him was that it felt like he took music really, really seriously. And that for me was like a real breath of exciting air, was to find someone who, it just felt like you could do whatever you wanted together, you know. So we started doing a lot of these old country songs, murder ballads and things like that. And then we started writing a lot of our own material and put out a couple of albums together. And I think that was always interesting, was the combination of flavors that we had. Yeah. And people often talk about these two really distinctive voices, and one being the obvious cliche of the fresh, hopeful, and then the old, world-beaten kind of character that we had, that I had. So that was something that was really, really nice to play with, the idea of a story or a conversation between these two figures.
The Sad But True albums, they're truly wonderful. 3 volumes of them now. Was it always meant to be a multi-album project?
Yeah, it's actually not really anywhere near completed, I don't think. We had a couple of volumes that I had a couple of more. Each album's meant to have concept in it, and the concepts are definitely there for at least volumes 4 and 5, and probably another 4 more volumes, the way I would see it, as being complete. But the idea also is that it's an open-ended thing, so it's definitely something I'd like to push further.
Oh, wonderful.
The Sad But True idea, yeah.
Yeah. You're certainly well
We did
travelled.
volume three. We with Tammy Nielsen came on and did some stuff with us for that.
Yep.
And there was another thing of having another character in there that could really just add so much, you know. Tammy's spark and vitality, her songwriting sensibility, and the whole fantastic history and knowledge she has with that genre really felt like it added a lot to where that was going.
You're certainly a well-travelled person. You've been based in various places over the world and touring internationally. How much of your travels and experiencing places and cultures around the world is seeped into your music?
I don't know. It's hard to say, really. I mean, all of it must have somehow. It would all have an effect on me, I guess, even if it's just that it's led you to this point in your life. I think it's stopped me being so fixed on having a cultural identity as a songwriter. You know, or going, oh yeah, I'm one of these guys, I'll do this. I just started to make me see there's all this music in the world. There's so many similarities between it. And then there's all these different flavours as well. But I guess I kind of thought it stopped me seeing limitations culturally or barriers that I thought something I shouldn't go past. But I think it also stopped me seeing myself as having a horizon in terms of who I'm writing for. Like, I'm not really writing for people in New Zealand as I see it, or people in Switzerland, or people in this, you know, it's not my border, that's not my horizon. I see myself as writing much more for anybody, wherever they might be from.
Yeah. I've seen you described as someone that has managed to fuse or bring traditional music forms like country and folk into a modern type setting. Is that something you see in yourself? Is that something you think you've achieved?
Yeah, I always look at it like with this show, like the solo show I did, it's definitely got an old sound to it, you know, and a lot of the songs are really old songs. I'll do covers of Robert Johnson or Skip James or Billie Holiday, but then it's got an electronic side because it's working with a loop machine, and it's got this sort of trance flavour that comes into it too, which is also a really old concept. So for a while I started to feel like I was taking old songs and dragging them kicking and screaming into the future, and then getting these old songs, getting new songs and somehow putting them back in a historical reference too. So it definitely felt like that time idea is elastic, and the idea of where something's from is timeless in a way. I mean, music is a way to get outside those borders of time. You listen to a Roy Orbison song, it takes 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and it feels like it's been 4 hours of some classic epic story you've gone through.
You were involved in a documentary last year, Devil in the Parlour. I haven't had the pleasure of seeing it, but tell us how it all came together.
It was a friend of mine, a long-term friend, who had wanted for a long time to film a live concert and have a bit of an interview around that concert. And I ended up giving him a whole lot of footage that I'd shot, which was, I do a lot of stuff on tour. I kind of take photos and film things I see, and I end up in some interesting places, so I always feel like I've got to try and catch it somehow. I sometimes feel guilty for going to sleep because I feel like there's so much more out there you should be doing or capturing, but then my rationale is that, well, you'll come back, so just go to sleep. So he took a whole lot of this field recording footage that I had and built that into the film too. So these are kind of, the film's like a live concert with an interview. And then a lot of the live recording is cut together with footage from touring. So you kind of get a feeling of a tour, really, because you're watching it and you're seeing things of me waking up, or you're seeing things of me traveling, or me in different places, what I see, and then it's all sort of tied together with this live concert footage.
Yeah. And with the live concert footage, was it difficult to not be aware of the camera there watching you the whole time? Or?
It didn't really bother me that much. I mean, it's there. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
People see you anyway. It's hard. I mean, the idea that you're committing it down, I found that harder because I made an album, Devil in the Parlour, and that was as well. So it was a recording of a live show, because people would always come up after the concerts and they'd want to say, well, what did you play tonight? Because they want to take that home to listen to. So I finally got around to making a live album, and called Devil in the Parlour, which the idea of that came from doing some of these really small house concerts where you feel like you're this person who's come into somebody's home. People have bought tickets to come and see you at a house concert in Albuquerque or somewhere in New Zealand or wherever, and they sit there and you kind of unleash this show on them that feels like you've sort of collected this bunch of spirits from all around the world and your different experience, and you sort of open the bag and it all comes out in the room. And I was just sitting in someone's living room playing one of these concerts and seeing like a nice table lamp on the corner, putting light up the wall, and just the weird idea of how you've brought this big experience of your world and what it means and pulled it into somebody's living room. There was this idea of like the Devil in the Parlour.
Yeah. You've also been active as a producer, producing other artists, and artists of varying musical styles as well. How challenging have you found that side of your work?
No, it's really challenging. It's a really great thing to do. Like, I did a lot of what I would call production for my own albums over the years, just trying to get the sound how I wanted it and be true to the vision I'd had at the beginning. And then realising what's involved in that process, felt like I could do it for other people too. So I did it for the Sad But True albums that me and Marlon did with Ben Edwards, who engineered them. And then officially, Tammy Nielsen was the first artist who asked me to produce her album. And so once I saw it in those terms, it really helped me to see what's involved in that. Sometimes it's picking someone up from the airport. Sometimes it's cooking people a meal. Sometimes it's making sure people get a break. Sometimes it's stopping people telling jokes. Sometimes it's giving someone a beer. Sometimes it's taking a beer away from them. Sometimes it's playing on the album. Sometimes it's not. You know, it's really a matter of, to sum it up, what I always look at it like is you want to be producing an artist you can see in a certain way. You think you can see something about this artist that hasn't been brought to light before, and you so you go about arranging a lighting system around them so everybody else can see that thing that you saw, those facets in that person that you thought were worthy of showing people, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at it. And it's not to say, oh, you are going to do this album, or I've got all this stuff for you to do. It's to try and bring out the essence of that person in the way that you think best shows who they are.
Yeah.
So it's like that with directors I've worked with as well. They're not trying to get you to do something you can't do. They're just trying to remove all the other stuff around you that gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. Do you approach the role of producing other artists a little differently to how you would sit down and produce your own material?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's not so much a matter of my tastes in the end. It is ultimately, and you can't really escape that. But I think it's also definitely a matter of what you think that person is, you know, what you think their their essence is. If it's something you're not really into, you probably shouldn't be producing them.
Yeah.
Even if it might be something that'll bring you huge. It might be a big artist might come and say, you want to produce my album, but if you don't really like them, I don't know if it's the right job to do.
Yeah.
There has to be someone you see something special in, or someone who resonates with you that you think, yeah, I could help uncover this. I could distill this essence for people to see.
For sure. Tell us about the area that you're based in over there at the moment, Littleton. I believe there's quite a vibrant musical community there.
It's been home to lots of artists over the years. I think it always has been. It always will be. It's had some incredible visual artists living there. Photographers, painters, people, musicians. Around that time of the earthquake, it seemed like there was a lot of musicians living there. And I think the funny thing about the earthquake was it was kind of like a cross-section of a community, because everything stopped so still so suddenly. You could actually see what was there. So there was a real vibrant musical scene, and everybody started to work together because we kind of all knew each other anyway. But that earthquake helped us to have the time and the space. I mean, people say if you've got friends, for musicians to see their other musician friends, the only way to do it is to organise a gig together, because you're either out of town or working or never in the same place. So that's the only way to catch up with your friends, is to organise a show with them. And then that earthquake was kind of like that. It was just, okay, all bets are off. There's no venues anymore. Everyone's totally traumatised, so no one wants to go on tour. And we just all hung around. And then Adam McGrath had this great idea to do the Harbour Union project, which was an album of songs recorded about the earthquake by all the musicians in Littleton, and that was all the proceeds from that were to go to people who we thought needed financial help, that maybe might have had trouble getting something happening fast through other more official agencies. So we made that and sold a whole lot of copies of it, and helped pay for certain things or help people out if they needed some money. And that was definitely a cross-section of a vibrant musical scene. I think now it's always moving, so people come in and people go, and other people have heard, Littleton's the place to be, so they'll come and want to hang out there for a bit and do their thing. It's kind of nice. It's like a natural amphitheatre.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a harbour, so it's a bay, you know. So you can always look at, you can kind of see the whole place at once, and everywhere it's got a really nice view, because it's all water and hills, rocks and mountains. So it's nice. It's a really picturesque place to be. And it has that feeling of movement as well, because it's a port, so you've got ships coming in and out all the time. You've got Russians and Koreans and people from all different countries coming through, but also because it's through a tunnel, it has a kind of a feeling of, not the end of the line, but like a, you know, it's not on the way to anywhere really. So it's an interesting dynamic in that port.
And just before I let you go, Delaney, tell us about the concept, the inspiration behind your Magic Lightbox shows. It looks wonderful.
Well, that was born out of the idea of getting all this footage together to show Harley Williams for the Devil in the Parlour documentary, and realising, there's all this stuff here. And then I was talking to an arts festival director about a show, and he said, maybe you should think about doing something that's a bit more than a musical show. And straight away, it seemed like film was the logical place to move into. So I started to plan this show, and then cut a lot of it together out of, I didn't want it to be that narrative. I wanted it to be really oblique, so it's something you can just sort of watch, and it's not a story. Whatever you see in it and whatever you bring to it is whatever you want, you know, and just to provide all this raw material for people to watch and play music at the same time. Of course, you can't help but tweak it, and the way you edit it, it's going to have a natural flow anyway. But that was the first one, and the second one was much more concentrating on stories and was meant to be even less narrative, but ended up becoming even more narrative. So it's got recognizable European folk tales in it, as well as sort of strange, grim little folk tales that I've written myself, and footage of different travels I've had where I was definitely making it for the Magic Lightbox show, and I've taken all the songs from Shining Day as the soundtrack, and worked on the second show with a director who helped me really refine what I was doing, so it felt very essential, and work on a, what would you call it, like a speaking part that sort of weaves these films together somehow, talking about me and my life and what I want, which was amazing it's always incredible working with a director. So I was very grateful to her for her help.
Yeah.
There. It's kind of a Hansel and Gretel meets Dr. Caligari down in the Tierra del Fuego, was my one sentence summary of what the show's like. Because it does have this old cautionary tale element to it, and it does have a very German expressionist look to it, the way I filmed it all. And I wanted to bring in this idea of magical characters, native magical characters who were like doorways between different worlds and could instigate change or bend the rules or make things happen that weren't previously possible, which is, the more I started to look at it, the more I realized it was a clown that I was looking at, who can fulfill all those functions in a situation. And then I started to see all these links between the coyote mythology and the trickster and the clown, and see how these through history have been roles that certain gods would play when they wanted to bring about change. So there's a lot of examples of this, how gods would do this, or gods would make sacrifices to themselves. It's kind of heady, actually, and sounds all very academic, but it's it's something that I noticed happening when you want to make change the rules or change tradition or change things that have felt like they've been stuck for a long time in a certain way.
Yeah. And 2018's been a busy year for you. What's coming up for the rest of this year and into next year for you?
I'm just about to start a tour in New Zealand, like a domestic tour. So I'll do 8 shows here. And then early December, I'll come over to Melbourne and I'll play on the 8th of, the 4th of December in the Old Bar in Fitzroy.
Oh, yeah.
With Harry Howard and Edwina Preston's band, Duet, they're called. It always looks funny when you write it on the poster because it looks like Delaney Davidson Duet, but it's not. It's Delaney Davidson and Duet.
Okay.
Yeah. So I met them a couple of years ago. I came over and we played a show together and I really liked what they were doing. So asked if they were interested to do a show together again, and luckily they were. I think it's their last show for 2018, and for me it'll be my first and last show in Melbourne for 2018.
All in one.
All in one, yeah.
Yeah. What about recording-wise? Anything on the horizon there?
I've got 2 releases that'll be coming out soon. One is a recording with Bruce Russell, who is guitar player for the Dead Sea. It's a noise outfit that's been working for years here in New Zealand, which is a Charlie Feathers tribute, weirdly enough, and was summarised by a friend of mine as sounding like Charlie Feathers reaching up from hell to grab David Lynch by the ankle. So I don't know if so that was a nice description there. And the other thing I've got, which will be coming out probably next year in April, will be a collaboration with Barry Saunders, who's a elder gentleman statesman of our country music here in New Zealand, and has played with the Waratahs for years. So we got together and wrote an album and recorded that. So I've got those 2 co-written things coming out, and then my next recorded project, I have a couple of things I'm cooking up at the moment. One's sort of half recorded, and one's an idea, and another one's another idea, but they're all collab things. So my next solo stuff will be my 10th solo album. So I've got a couple of ideas about how I'd like that to be, but I think I'm definitely going to get it really how I want it before I start to work on it.
Okay.
In the studio.
Well, Delaney, it's been great catching up with you. Congratulations on a wonderfully diverse body of work so far, and we look forward to the upcoming instalments.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and nice to talk. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
And you. All the best, and we'll see you in Melbourne in a few weeks.
Great.
Okay. Thanks again, Delaney.
Take care.
All the best.
Thanks, John. Stay in touch if you want to. Okay.
Will do. Cheers.
See ya.
Bye-bye.